All right, time to start this process. I'm gonna snip a lot of this stuff, desolder some of it, pull the pots out and lift the board up and take a look on what's on the other side. Now, these are not the original pots, and I don't think these are original knobs because these are press-on knobs, and every Marshall from that period I've seen has had set screw knobs. But these are solid shaft replacement pots, so to make the knobs kind of sort of work, press-on knobs on a solid shaft pot, they heated up the pot shaft and then pressed the knob onto the hot metal to form it. So these were staying on, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in here, so it can no big deal to get some better quality replacement knobs. These are not the originals, unless Marshall was using push-on knobs for a brief period in '76, and I just haven't run into that before. But these are not the original pots, and they're crappy, and none of the nuts were tight. There are no toothed washers in place, and so all the grounds for the preamp were being made to this bus wire, which did not have a good connection to ground because all the hardware was loose. So this is going to be satisfying. Don't try this at home. Nothing I'm doing here is an original wire, so it does not matter that I'm cutting it. If this were a vintage amp that I was working on, every bit that was original that could be retained would be retained, and I'd be much more careful as I went. But this has been done so poorly that I have a certain amount of freedom to express my feelings. Be careful, I'll express my feelings in verse, and we don't want that. Let's see. Anything left connected to this? Got a ground wire here, which should not be on top. Got a wire here. Say goodbye to all this garbage. Say goodbye to all of this. Hello to oblivion. All right. I'll clean all this stuff off here, so when we put the new pots with tooth washers, we will have good metal-to-metal contact, though I will not be using any of the pot to chassis connections for ground. Let's see how easily these, oops, there goes a cardboard box. Let's see if I can get these out pretty easily. Usually it's a piece of cake. There's metal hole plugs. Let's see. Do it from the side. Okay, now that panel is loose, which is good, which means when I a little bit remove these power switches, the power and standby switch, then this entire front panel will come off, and I can begin to straighten it by clamping it through some solid sheets of steel. But for right now, we're gonna get this board out. Now this does not feel like the original wire, which should be going to this, and there's a huge blob of solder on here. I have to be very careful in this area because there are some original wires here and here. I don't want to mess them up, but it's been poorly hacked so much. I think I'm gonna move the camera and tripod to a different location so it's out of the way. Let me get that set up so I can show you this. All right, let's dive into this awfulness here. I wonder how many layers of wire are in here. I hate this whole thing. I ordered a big solder pulp and it has not arrived yet. It's slowing me down. These little ones get clogged so easy. It's very aggravating. All right. Anyway, let me look at it before I start doing any more. All right, I've got a big thing of frayed strands here. That looks to be coming from this side. This all would have been originally neatly wrapped. Okay. Hopefully there's enough slack beneath the board that I can redo this properly. Yeah, all right. So that's just the screen connection. That'll be easy. I can replace that wire if necessary, but I have enough slack. I should be able to make that pretty. And on this one, it's an old wire from a mystery connection that has not been there for quite some time. And again, let me look at this one. All right, this is a solid core wire. And again, I've got just enough slack. I should be able to reuse that cleanly in the future. Let me get some of this excess solder off here. Well, that's warm. Let me pause this for a second. Okay, I declogged this little anodized piece of shit. There I go again. It takes longer and longer to prove these things are suitable for ads when I forget and use my French. All right, now, as I heated that post up, it developed some wiggle. So I'll have to pay special attention to the solder joint on the bottom where that post is going to a copper trace on the PCB. And there's a little bit of excess solder there on this dropping resistor. Where did my braid go? Pause this while I find where I put my braid. Oh, here it is. Someone mentioned that I waste braid. I don't waste braid, but braid is inexpensive. I can get more. I'm not gonna go too slowly on this stuff. I don't want to save $1 if it means that I'm doing poor work on an amplifier worth a couple thousand times that. So. All right, that's separated. Weird, awful, stiff, solid core wire throughout. Let's see, I bet this end's much the same. That one, I'm not sure if I'll be able to reuse as is. It's pretty tight. It's going to depend on where the other end of it goes, if I can free up some excess, or if I need to replace this wire or do a splice later. We'll find out. This next white one should be the center tap for the reservoir cap. Let's see. Not reservoir cap, sorry, the output transformer. So I gotta be careful not to mess it up, but honestly it's been messed up so much already with all this bird's nest awfulness. I mean, no one's asked, but if you were to ask why do we call it bird's nesting, because when this wire, the stranded wire, is misused, it does this, it just goes everywhere. So none of that end is usable. I cannot save the end of that in any way, so I'm going to snip that right there. I've got this wire here, these wires going to these diodes, and I have never seen them attached like this top side. I think someone was just being lazy, didn't want to pull the board. Yeah, well, those diodes are getting replaced anyway, so I'm going to cut the wire here, here, and here. Not all that long ago, I restored another 76, and that was an early legitimate 2204, though it only had two inputs, like other 22. Yeah, that was 2204. Sorry, it's 50 watt 76 2204. It's one of the first ones where it had only two inputs, but it had paralleled gain stages rather than cascaded, which is what they changed to in 77, which is the modern 2204, 2203 circuit that we all know. This one was turned into a bad version of the 2203, and we'll be turning this into a good version of the 1959 Superlead. It started off life as. I'll get those through the board once the board has got some slack. Hope you really like amp videos, because this is going to be a long one. So much criminal work in this. It's one thing if you've got to make an amp work because you got a gig in 30 minutes and you're working in a hotel room. But this level of work on this does not excuse need it ASAP, need to do it in a pinch. This is someone taking their time to really botch things up. All right, that's all the connections that I see at this point. Next up is to remove these little screws and nuts. There's a missing nut here and a missing nut here. We get out the proper socket. If I remember where I put such things. This should be this one. I can't remember if it's a 6 or 5.5 on these. No, it's not a 5.5. Let's try a 5. Almost. Let's see how the 4.5 does. All right, so 5 millimeter. Is that right? Yeah, 5 millimeter. Whoever did the work on this before lost 2 of those nuts and tooth washers. I think I've got some spare ones around. If not, it is a still, oh, there's a missing washer there. A common metric size, M3, I believe. But it kills me that someone worked on this 76 Marshall and lost that hardware. I work on Blues Juniors and I don't lose the hardware to them. Put it carefully in one spot. If I'm going to be walking away for a couple of hours or whatever, or waiting for parts to arrive, I will then put it in a Ziploc bag or something. Oh, I see 2 wires I forgot. But I don't lose hardware, especially on 76 Marshalls. All right, so I need to cut this red wire here. Tilt that up, and I've got one more connection here. That one looks like it's one of the few remaining factory solder joints here. So here's where it gets a little bit tricky. It's good, I get to show something. There's a little bit of exposed wire here, right between the turret and the white wire. And I'd like to get this out without melting the insulation on that white wire, which is not something I fussed with these others because they were either replaced wires or had been butchered already. But this one's in good factory shape, and I'm gonna see what I can do to maintain that. So I'm gonna take these hemiostats, see if I can get in there, metal to metal contact. All right, that is going to eat the heat. So as I heat up this turret and the solder, this will absorb most of the heat. So hopefully I'll be able to do this without melting all that insulation on that wire. And I'm going to try a pass with the solder sucker first because I can get up a lot of stuff fast. And then I will follow that up with braid and see how I do. Jehoshaphat, this sucker sucks, or doesn't. All right. I think the post office lost my solder pult order. I've had a few things disappear in the postal service this year. Not forever. They show up within 9 months or so, but I think I'm gonna have to order another solder pult. I don't think I'm getting the one I ordered 2 weeks ago. All right, at this point, hopefully now, that just pulls right away. Let's see how the hemostats did. Well, I got a little bit of the wire insulation compressed by the hemostats, but I was able to desolder this without the entire plastic insulation starting to melt all the way up here, which is what can happen. So this is not the best job I've done, but this works very well, and I'll be able to redo this very cleanly. And when I'm done, it will look factory again. Before I pull this out, let me get the excess solder off of this one too. So I have a good starting point for all three. I'll try to get one more suck out of this solder sucker, and then it goes in the river, because it's just terrible. All right. They just clog ridiculously. It's a Teflon tip, and I've even used various oils in it to try to keep that from happening, and it just wants to happen. Now, when I heated that from the top side of the board, this big solder blob fell down from the bottom of the board. Remember, this is soldered on the other side. It's got a little bit of wiggle to it right now. And that's one of the reasons that even if everything was working great, I saw all these heated components like this and all the kludge work in this, I knew I had to pull the board, because you don't know what's happening on the other side. As things get overheated on this side, bad things happen on the other side. It's just how the world works. And this used to be somewhere important, doing important things. And now it's not doing that. And if I didn't find it, it would roll around the amp and maybe end up there. And bam, you got a short. So, on a similar note, people say, why not just tack solder? Well, there are places where you can tack solder. There are places where you can J-hook, but a PCB is not a place to J-hook or tack solder, because on this resistor here, which is soldered to the leads of the old resistor that was here, when you heat it on the top to do this, it heats the bottom of the trace as well, and you have no idea whether you have a good connection down there, or whether things are pulling loose, or if all the solder just breaks off in a blob like it did here. There's some minor heat damage on this too. This will all clean up nicely. But let's see what's happening now when I pull the board up and tilt it back. I'm gonna get some of these solid wires out of the way. Oh, I forgot why I mentioned that other 76 Marshall earlier. I'll be using it as a template for how to put this back together. I mean, I've got the schematics and all that, but I have a real good example of a factory condition 76 now. So we reposition things so you can see what I'm seeing. Okay, wow. Just wow. I've never quite seen anything like this. Someone tried to reinforce the traces that they were damaging, but there are broken solder joints I can see here from a foot off. I'm going to get in here when I start removing things, and I will see if all this reinforcement is necessary or whether someone went a little too gung-ho. And I'll have to clean this off. I mean, look at it. Spit clean this area here. There's a huge layer of funk and yuck on this board. Dirt, old solder, many pads that are just gone. Okay, let me pause this for a second. All right, Chewy, I've got a bad feeling about this. This is getting from the realm of can I do something to should I. I think that this amp has been butchered to the point where it is almost impossible for me to guarantee any work done on this board at this point. I can do it, but it's such a huge amount of work and awfulness. This is really, really bad. So I'm going to call the owner after he sees this video. I'm going to call him before he sees this video, but I'm going to let him know he needs to see this video, then call me. This is a shame because none of this damage was necessary. This is just really bad work on a colossal scale. But a new board for one of these, either a reissue that might fit, that's unpopulated, that I could populate as I see fit, or a turret board, which I can design in about 30 minutes and put on here, that would be even better than any 76 board, is a much more cost-effective and reliable way to go. And I would prefer to do a replacement turret board for this because it would be bulletproof, it would be beautiful, it would sound right, and I could even place some of the turrets close together and use some of the components that are particular to a 76. I wouldn't use these ceramic disc caps, but there was a green Phillips cap used in the early to mid 70s, and there's a white version of that, the chiclet, which can sound really good. And there's a cap that Vichy makes that's essentially the same cap made in the same factory, it's just orange now instead of green. Or I could do axials like the older Mullards, not Mullards, the Mustards. I could do some really nice work here. But I don't think anything needs to be done using this board because someone has already done it to death. So stay tuned. I'm gonna have to talk to the owner and see where we go from here.